trade, we've been thinking about international protectionism as well, the protectionist policies. So if we could join in there, we've got most of you arriving now. You see, you've got a little red dot by you for some reason. Not sure why. All right, here we go. Rest are arriving. W6KNQ. Okay. Now, team. All right. We introduced trade and discussed what trade was. We talked about how countries would trade because, right? There are becauses. One of the reasons why countries would trade is to obtain goods and services that they can't produce themselves, or that they can't produce efficiently themselves. They might be buying, trading in order to get goods at a lower cost, right, or a lower opportunity cost. Because remember, some of the goods and services that they're getting are, you know, resources. They're factors of production used in the production of other goods and services. Might be that they're just wanting to sell their goods to other countries, so increase the market, sell more products, increase their revenues, create more jobs, more income, etc. All of that are really good reasons why countries trade. From an economics point of view, additional concepts we could think about and add into our answers: economies of scale. You've got a bigger market, so you've got more scale, right? Decreasing costs of production potentially because of that. Increased variety, choice of goods and services for the consumers. Improved efficiency because of the level of competition. We've got political benefits, and we've talked a bit about political benefits before. You know, countries that may not trade with each other but may have, you know, political disagreements with each other, they could possibly be resolved by basically trade diplomacy. And the idea of economic development, which is that link between economic development now and international trade. So we're going to find that economic development is going to be the sort of topic that actually brings all of the other economics topics all in together, which is kind of cool. We talked about the idea of free trade. We talked about the idea of protectionism, right, where free trade meant that there was no interventions at all. Right? And protectionism was when we were setting barriers up in order to protect our domestic economy. You know, domestic employment potentially more than anything else. Part of international trade came about because of the mercantilists, but the idea of globalisation, the spreading out around the world, okay? So we saw some positive signs. We saw increased trade. We saw more competition, economies of scale, all of those key concepts that we talked about before, but also some negative ones where there was increases in unemployment as a result of movements from one sector to another, structural unemployment, tax avoidance, because of the fact that you're now able to put the base of your business, the headquarters of your business in a different country, which might have different tax laws. You might end up reducing the amount of tax that you pay. And you've seen the news, you've seen some of those big companies like Amazon and the reports on how little they actually pay in tax by comparison to other businesses. And obviously the idea of monopoly power, etc., that could be generated. Other groups have also pointed out how international trade, globalization, can lead to income inequalities across the world, can actually lead to the destruction of local industries, the dependence, the growing dependence that countries have on other countries. And relatively recent case study is Eastern Europe and the dependence that Eastern Europe seems to have on Russia with regards to gas, all right? So the power that they might need to run their entire economy and heat their homes and all of those sorts of things has come from Russia, all right? And that includes a significant dependency on them, which might lead to some problems in the future based on pricing, but also potentially based on just saying, nah, you know, interruptions to supply. We just won't be able to do it, right? So there could be all sorts of things like those that go on. Human rights abuses that happen, displacement of indigenous people from their lands, unfair labor practices. And we talked about how all sorts of countries, China, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, even America, has had questions about some of their labour practices and some human rights issues, all right? And that is beyond the discussion about what happens to people's cultures as we become what's called McWesternized, right, around the world, and also environmental degradation, or the destruction of the environment. So here's a big thing that you need to be able to do. Again, it's this evaluation. What is one advantage of globalization and one disadvantage of globalization? So have a go, put a question, put an answer in, what one advantage of globalization is and one disadvantage of globalization. Just one, but the key skill, as said, is explain. One advantage and one disadvantage of globalization. Quite an important skill to be able to do. You still there? Having a go? There we go. Good work, Lynn. Yeah, okay, Lynn. Because of trade, well done, and globalization, products consumers buy could be cheaper, or resources businesses buy could be cheaper, gaining them economies of scale, but it may lead to the destruction of local industries. Well done, Lynn. Very good. Wait for the rest of you. Yes, Connor, that's good. Cheaper costs of production as firms can take advantage of economies of scale. Well done. May be detrimental to local businesses as more and more foreign firms enter the economy, use up the resources. Yes, absolutely right, Connor. Well done. All right, good work. Eric. The advantage of globalization increases global competition, which drives prices down. Excellent. Creates a large variety of choices for consumers. The disadvantage is that it may cause cultural loss. Absolutely. And that can be quite, I mean, you know, I came from a very Western country, but I say Western country, New Zealand was a colony of Britain. So what was the you know, indigenous population, the Maori, you know, the cultural aspects there, have they disappeared? No, they haven't. They've kind of been integrated into New Zealand and actually used as a marketing tool for the country, for the sport in the country, and also for a lot of businesses. So maybe it won't get rid of culture if it's used in a correct way. Advantage of globalization, yes, good. Well done. Yeah, absolutely, Wenching. Well done. That's exactly what we'd want to see. Okay, so we're looking at probably about 4 marks per answer. When you develop these, it would be absolutely awesome to also put in things like real-life examples. You know, that would be a good one to start getting into the practice of as well. Oh, okay, I see what you're going for, Yasin. Yeah, your sentence got a little confusing around where you talked about war, but then you fixed it at the end. The industry suffer to some extent of this year. Yes, good. None. Increase capital and labour mobility. Well done. Yeah, absolutely right, Charles. Prices, yes. Yeah. Okay, absolutely brilliant. Very well written, Anyi. That's exactly the sort of level that I would be expecting from a year 11 for this particular question. And what's more, as said, if you're wanting them to develop it even further, turn it into a 6-mark question, then it would be explain an advantage and disadvantage of globalisation using a real-life example. And that would then push it even further. Right, now, ladies and gentlemen, specialisation. We remember specialisation. We remember this idea about a country could concentrate its production on a particular product, a limited variety of goods, right? They become very efficient at producing that. They then use that as a competitive advantage. And the example that we gave was the idea of the Middle East and the oil and gas reserves. We could talk about Malaysia and, you know, palm oil, which we have this competitive advantage in. And so therefore we produce, there's a concentration of that, and we tend to focus in on it. All right, now if I move on, no, we'll skip past that one. Why might we specialize? We're going to specialize because we're able to gain higher output, more production of goods and services, and that will also lead to surpluses being created, which we're then able to trade, which, you know, increases the production of goods and services throughout the world. All right, that tradable goods then become revenue sources and employment sources for individuals within the countries. Lower costs, as you already pointed out, economies of scale, because you're specializing, you're concentrating your production and producing at bigger scale. It is able then to spread the ideas and the technology around the world because you are trading those goods, right? So whatever the idea is, whatever the technology is, it can be spread around the world, right? Then there's the idea of increasing competition, increasing efficiency, right? Which we've discussed already. So how important is specialization and how important is globalization to international trade? And the answer is very important. Those are two key planks to international trade, right? They have come about through the sort of mercantilist philosophy, so we can, you know, discount some of the negative things, but there are some real positives that can come about with regards to specialization and trade. All right. Now, this was where we discussed the idea of comparative advantage and absolute advantage, all right? Now, we may have gotten this a little bit mixed up or a little bit confused, so I wanted to just go back over this, all right? Where is my, don't worry about that. An absolute advantage is when you are able to produce absolutely more of a product than another country, okay? So you have a lower average cost than the other countries. You are able to produce more of that product, right? So the US has a output per worker of 5 cars to Brazil's 2. So therefore, the US can produce absolutely more cars than Brazil can. But when you make a comparison to bananas, yes, America can produce bananas, but Brazil has an absolute advantage in the production of bananas. So what you would expect to see, right, is the US focusing their attention on the production of cars and Brazil focusing their production on bananas, because that's what they have an absolute advantage in the production of, okay? Now, if, I'll skip past that, and that. If we come across a situation where we are able to produce both goods, but we have a comparative advantage in the production of one. So I've got Harry and Lloyd, Just came up with them, right? Harry can produce birdhouses and tables. Lloyd can produce birdhouses and tables. But Lloyd has a comparative advantage in the production of tables, whereas Harry has a comparative advantage in the production of birdhouses. Now, in theory, Harry could produce both, and Lloyd could produce both. But if Harry chose to specialize, okay, and Lloyd chose to specialize, then they'd actually be better off for it, because they would be able to trade their surpluses and gain extra revenues. That's what comparative advantage is all about. It's about having a lower opportunity cost, being able to produce these products more efficiently and better than the other country, right? Now, we don't need to worry too much about the maths of that until you get to IB. There is a tiny little bit of maths on that, and I showed it to you the other week or the other day, and it may have confused you, and so I apologize, but that's essentially what we are referring to. So if we can jump back. Now, there was absolute advantage. What did I have before that? Yeah, I'll try this. Let's see if this works. If I push play, and this should work on your screens, hopefully. This is international trade, the argument between Donald Trump and his thought processes about trade, and Milton Friedman, a very famous economist, and his thought processes on trade. So hopefully this will work on your screens as well. So if I push play here.
I'll be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. I'll take them back from China, from Japan, from Mexico. Ford is building a $2.5 billion factory, car plant, manufacturing plant for cars, trucks, and parts in Mexico.
How do you keep them?
You put a penalty on, a tariff or whatever you call it. And believe me, China's doing it to us. China dumps all their stuff with us, and I'm not complaining about that. But I have friends that are manufacturers. They cannot get their product into China. So if they're going to do it to us, we have to do it to them.
And they'll say, but then my car is going to cost more for your people.
No, you know what? They're going to make cars here. And maybe a person will buy fewer cars over the course of a lifetime. Who cares?
All right. What was a tariff? What do you think a tariff was? What was he talking about with regards to a tariff? Sorry about the neighbours with their car. They just keep revving the engine. Keep it going because it's been sitting for a while. Are you seeing this on the screen? Is this coming up on your screen as well?
Yes,
It's there?
Yeah.
So all you have to do is just say what a tariff is and type your answer in. Mentioned it in the video. What is a tariff?
I think it's loading really slowly.
Is that?
I submitted, but then yeah, it's not showing up.
Okay. Right. It is quite interesting when you hear people talk. I mean, politicians naturally talk and they try and have a degree of confidence with regards to what they're saying so that people will believe them. Donald Trump takes that to a whole nother level. Right? He can be saying absolute nonsense, and the degree of confidence with which he approaches everything he says makes people think, oh yeah, well, and not actually question the reality of what it is that he's saying. So he's talking about putting a tariff on. Now it may be that it's not working the question function. I apologize. All right. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. All right, let's see what else he has to say.
If you look at what countries like China are doing to this country, they are eating our lunch. We're building China. We are really building China because everything we make is made in China or other countries. It's not made here. We don't make things anymore. We don't make, as an example, I ordered thousands of windows the other week, a couple of weeks ago. They're made in China. I said, does anybody make windows like in this country, in North Carolina, in Alabama, in Oregon, in places that used to make windows? They don't make them anymore. We're building China by ordering all of their products.
One of the things that baffles me is the extent to which people regard the trade deficit as a bad thing. Let's go back. The Japanese have a very large trade deficit. They have a surplus, from their point of view, a deficit from, what is it, 50 billion? Now, what have they been doing with that $50 billion over the last 10 years? Giving it to us. They've been making Americans rich. They've been buying golf courses at inflated prices. They've been buying property at inflated prices. Almost every one of their investments has gone sour.
Right. Okay. If I just jump back to the meat, I'll just stop sharing. Jump back to the meat. The trade deficit was the phrase that was being used. And this is something Donald Trump, again, about. A trade deficit simply talks about the exports minus the imports. So the amount of money you're earning from your exports minus the amount of money you're paying for your imports. So if you're paying more for your imported products, you have a deficit. If you're earning more from your exports, you have a surplus on your trade balance. There's a whole lot more complicatedness surrounding that. But that's what you need to think about now. You've seen that before because that was in GDP. C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So that is the trade balance. All right, now, okay. Oops, jump back. Nearpod. All right, so the comment here is, if China has a trade surplus with the US, what is China actually doing with the money? All right, so America is buying a whole lot of Chinese goods. So what does China do with the money? So Donald Trump says we're giving China all this money, but what is China actually doing with the money? Does anybody know? What was it that Milton Friedman was saying?
They are developing their own country.
Yes.
Like building infrastructure and stuff with the money they have with the trade surplus.
They are. And what else are they doing with it? They're buying what?
To buy more product that they want.
Absolutely, Charles. They're buying more American, particularly, but American products. Now, we lived in China for 3 years. It did feel like a bit longer than that. Okay. And one of the things that amazed us was a restaurant called KFC. I don't know if you're familiar with KFC. I'm sure you are. You'll be familiar with KFC. But in the city that we lived in, the companies would hold business meetings in KFC. All right. People would take their families to KFC as a special treat because KFC was seen as a luxury good, right? By comparison to the street food and other restaurants, etc., it was American. Was it totally different? Okay. It's seen as being American. It's seen as being Western. There was a prestige factor to going to KFC, and you'd literally see, and in the city we were in, you'd see them holding business meetings in there. It was one of the weirdest things I think I've ever seen. But it made sense, right? Same case in Japan. It makes absolute sense because it's seen as that we've arrived, but by buying KFC, they are contributing to the American economy because KFC is an American brand. Yeah. How can they afford that? They can afford that by selling all of their products to America. And that's the only way that they're able to afford all of those more expensive celebrating birthdays. Absolutely. Yeah. Celebrating birthdays. A good thing to do. All right. So they are spending the money, and the wealthier China gets, the more expensive and more luxury end of the market that they are able to then buy. Oops, sorry. Yeah. Oh, right, sorry. Lost track of that one. Let's skip ahead. There. There. All right, okay. Now, this is a slightly different video, this one, and this is a really good one, and it's going to illustrate the arguments about trade in perhaps a clearer way for you. All right, let's have a look.
Hey, Internet, Jacob Griffith. Now, you've probably heard about President Trump's executive order banning trade between the states. For example, Florida oranges can't be traded for corn made in Iowa. Let's talk about this and the economics of President Trump. Okay, I don't make econ videos like this very often because it gets political. So let's start with some ground rules. Number one, don't watch just 30 seconds of this video and complain in the comments because I don't support your political or world views. Watch the whole video, understand what I'm trying to say, then complain in the comments. Number two, I think every American should give President Trump a chance to lead. I mean, he was democratically elected, and he deserves a chance to present his economic policies and explain why he feels they're going to work. Now, that said, Americans have a responsibility to research and understand the true benefits and costs of those economic policies. Let's go back and talk about Trump's plan to ban interstate trade. Well, it's not true. I made it up. Fake news, half-truths, and alternative facts are probably the most serious economic problem facing the U.S. today. People can't be expected to accept or reject economic policies if they don't have accurate and unbiased information. Of course, fear-mongering and playing to popular sentiment is nothing new, but the ongoing battle between Trump and the media is undermining each of their credibility. Misinformation leads to economic problems, right? If the media indiscriminately blasts everything the president does, then people won't be able to discern between Trump's good policies, his okay policies, his policies, and his policies. The United States and the world is getting polarized, and it's easy to lock yourself into an echo chamber. Don't do it. Seek different views, talk about them, debate them, and share them on social media. I mean, that's why I'm making this video. Since Trump took office, we've seen all sorts of executive orders, like his immigration ban. So whether you personally like it or not, Trump appears to be keeping his campaign promises. But one of his most important policies, economically speaking, he still hasn't fully revealed. It's his vow to put America first and limit international trade. It's what economists call protectionism. Mainstream economists almost all agree that trade is good. I mean, think of my fake news example. Would banning trade between states and forcing Iowa to produce their own oranges and Florida to produce their own corn really help people in those states? Each state has different climates and resources that allow them to produce different products at the lowest cost. I mean,
right, so what was the economics concept he's talking about here? So we'll just very quickly, because it's not doing what I want it to do, jump back to the meat. What economic concepts is he talking about in that we've just covered in that video clip? Protectionism, yes. What else?
International and interstate trade.
Yes, good. What else? Specialisation. Good work, Connor. Absolutely. All right. So that idea of specialisation, because of the factor endowments that the different states have, leads to lower opportunity costs, so more efficient production of those products in those particular states. So specialisation is really important, okay, as a concept with regards to international trade, as is globalisation. All right, team, we're going to stop there. We will pick this up again next time, and we will continue on with the video. All right. And the point being that we're going to see is just how significant and how important trade is. But we're also going to unpick some of the arguments that say, no, trade is bad because of this, 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 and this. All right? I'm going to try and unpick some of those arguments. Now, you've had a go already at the multiple choice. Well done. I'll have a look at that. There is another question worksheet that should be arriving as well very soon, in fact. And it is about specialisation and trade and absolute and comparative advantage, okay? That will arrive soon, I believe, okay? Otherwise, team, please review the material. You'll be able to have a look at the video and add some more depth to your understanding in your notes. Do please log in to the elearneconomics.com website. Make sure you can get in there. You've logged in, you've set a password, have a look around, answer some questions, just get familiar with the site, and if there are problems, please email me. It's a really good revision tool, but only if it gets used. Otherwise, as we'd say in the land of my birth, hey Corneta, if you have particular questions, you can stay on the meet and we can have a chat, or you can also, alternatively, send us an email. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Please have a break away from the screens as well, right? Because otherwise you get that sort of Zoom fatigue thing going on. Right, so have a brilliant day, team.